Hey guys, Armando here from the Music Den. The following video you're about to watch is a conversation that took place earlier this afternoon. Jim Bricker and I were very fortunate to be able to sit down and have a conversation with British jazz guitarist Pete Oxley. Pete very graciously took time out of his busy schedule to discuss his latest project, Hejira, and their latest release, Live at the Cockpit. We once again want to thank Pete for very graciously taking time out of his busy schedule to have this wonderful conversation with us. So for all you out there, please grab yourself some food, grab a drink, sit back, and enjoy.
Hey, good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good whatever it is for wherever you're at. Welcome to the Music Den. You might recognize the host of our channel here, Armando Venditti, rocking the maroon. My name is Jim Bricker. I'm a usual suspect here on the channel. However, we are joined for this special occasion by a man who has not been on this channel before, but boy, are we looking forward to have a conversation with him. Mr. Pete Oxley, all the way from the United Kingdom, is joining us to discuss all kinds of musical things, but especially focused on the album Live at the Cockpit from the band that he's involved with, Hejira, which, I think it's a toss off, too simple a toss off to say it's a Joni Mitchell cover band, because it is definitely more than that. And
Definitely.
Armando and I, yeah, reviewed the album before on the channel, kind of fell head over heels with it, with what Pete and the band brought to Joni's material. And he was gracious enough to appear on the channel. And hopefully he'll feel like it was a worthwhile endeavor once we're all said and done with Mr. Oxley. So to Peter Oxley, welcome to the channel, sir.
Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on. And well, I'm looking forward to talking about. So I always am about the Hejira project and anything else you want to know.
We are very pleased that you are here, Pete. I do have to say that Live at the Cockpit is a fantastic album. Not only a live album, I consider it a journey of the heart and soul, personally for me. I think it's
Mm.
fantastic. We will get into the, origins of the project, but I thought maybe we'd go back a little bit. I've been reading up a bit about your history in terms of your early influences. And I do have one question for you. Yeah, how does one go from George Formby to Alberto Gismonti and Pat Metheny and Herbie Hancock and Ralph Towner as a musical influence in terms of that's quite the musical jump.
Yeah, quite a dump. But it didn't happen overnight.
Of course, of
I,
course.
I know my website, I've written it like that, but I mean it's true. I think, well, the thing was I started with classical music. I grew up in a classical family. My dad was a cathedral organist and my mum was a violin player. So it was classical music all the time. And when I heard, I think George Formby, somehow I came across him. And I remember how now I was very much into art and I thought that was probably going to be my career or that was my passion, was
Hmm.
drawing. As a kid, I drew all the time. And my folks sent me on a summer course, a drawing course. And there was a kid there with a ukulele banjo, and he played George Formby songs. And of course, they're imbued with a certain kind of jazz harmony, the dominant seventh chords, which somehow just really spoke to me. And so I fell for those songs, and then I persuaded my folks to get me a ukulele banjo, and I did, and I learned all those George Formby songs.
Hmm.
So that was kind of it. And I lived in a rural area in England, in a little town called Bury St Edmunds. And very little jazz came to Bury other than trad, what we call trad jazz over here, Dixieland, very early.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And and again, that there was a connection between that and George Formby, the music, the kind of sound, sonic, harmonic soundscapes. And
Okay.
so I would go to anything I could that came to my little town, which wasn't very much. There would be maybe sort of maybe four professional gigs a year in our local theatre playing that kind of music. So I would go to those, and I was too young to go to pubs to hear amateur bands
Mm.
playing. But when I
Okay.
was old enough to go to pubs, and I by then I'd been playing in a rock band, playing kind of prog music. I got into the old school prog.
Was
So
that
it's
Kashmir?
Sure.
Sorry, was that Kashmir?
yes, exactly. That was my band Kashmir. Yeah, with we were writing already. We got into writing music very much in sort of early Genesis mode, and yes, those kind of extended prog kind of things.
Yeah, great bands.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah, so I did that, and then that band parted because the drummer actually went to the Leeds College of Music to do the jazz course. And then I started playing in little bands, little trad jazz bands,
Mhm.
and that got me into playing at first that kind of Dixieland style of music. Uh, and then I got a gig at I got a place at a music college. In fact, it was the only music college in the country in England that you could study jazz, and I went there,
It's a
Mm.
and
it was the Leeds Jazz College.
that's it, yeah.
Yes. Okay.
And back then, as I say, it was the only place, and I kind of got in by I always say by false pretenses because the guitar teacher was into trad, and he was quite an elderly guy, and he hated modern jazz, and so there was this young
Okay.
guy, me, coming along and being into trad, and he said, "Why, you can have a place." Then I deferred my place because of I was doing at that point I was doing something completely different. I was doing an apprenticeship as a violin bowmaker, and I had one more year
Oh.
to do to complete my apprenticeship. And I luckily, I saw the sense in doing that, so I finished the apprenticeship, went to the music college a year later, by which time, sadly, the guitar teacher had died and had been replaced by
Mm.
a new kind of whiz kid, younger guy who was into all the jazz of the day, which sounded so completely different to me. And he was into the people that I would cite now, but it went right over my head because it sounded so different to my
Hmm.
experience. I didn't really have a very good time at college there, and I kind of left really unable to play and quite disillusioned with the whole jazz thing. And
Mm.
then
Okay.
there was a breakthrough moment when I went to Paris, and I met somebody who played me Miles Davis's seminal album, Kind of Blue. Now, can you imagine, after 3 years of jazz college, I'd never been made to listen to Kind of Blue,
Yeah.
which sounds
Hello.
Culture shock, basically. Yeah.
yeah, how can that be? And somebody played. I mean, it helped. It was a very nice French woman who played it to me, and I was just like, "Oh my goodness, what is this?" And I wanted it then. So I
Hmm.
came back to my hometown. I joined my library so that I could take out all the records they had. Back then, you could still take out records from a library.
Yes.
Oh
Yeah,
yeah.
all,
I
all the
remember that.
records that they had from that sort of late 1950s, early 1960s period. So all the Miles and Cannonball Adderley, Wes Montgomery, and all the associated musicians, Coltrane, of course,
Mm.
that were on the Kind of Blue album, Bill Evans. And I started listening to that. And at that point, that was when I knew I wanted the jazz thing. And so I came to it so relatively late. For real, I was 26 by then. And that's when I started practicing seriously. And so and by then I was living in Paris. I'd gone
Mhm.
back and I just sort of found myself living there literally by chance. And and so I was sort of trying to find, trying to access this music. And then one day I saw that playing at the New Morning, which was like the club in Paris, was Michael Brecker with his band
Oh.
Okay.
on that tour, where his first tour, having already been, the most recorded tenor sax player on the planet, having put out the first album of his under his own name, the one just called Michael Brecker,
Yeah.
which had, Pat Metheny on it and Jack DeJohnette, Kenny Kirkland, I think, on piano. Fantastic band.
Yeah.
And that was playing at the New Morning. And so I knew, yeah, Michael Brecker, all the kids at the music college, they used to talk about Michael Brecker and the Brecker brothers. I thought I better go to this. So I went to the New Morning, and totally blew me away. It was like a
Mm.
totally life-changing moment. And that's what got me into the jazz of the day. And a little bit later, a friend of mine played me. I think it was Still Life Talking by the Pat Metheny Group, and
Ah,
I was like,
fantastic album.
yeah,
Yeah, that was my first Pat Metheny album that I purchased. So, yeah,
right, yeah, and
amazing.
it's just like when I listened to that, I thought, all right, yeah, this is it. Where can you go from here in
Yeah,
terms of
Yeah, you're
writing?
either going to be inspired or depressed, right? By
Yeah,
yeah,
what
yeah,
Pat's putting
exactly.
one of
out
the
there.
two. Yeah, one of the two.
And
Okay.
I listened to that album, well, ever since, actually. I'll come back to it, and it's still, I just think it's such a fantastic piece of writing from beginning to end.
Yeah.
So, so, so you see that, so that was the jump from George Formby to this kind of music.
Okay.
And then, once I discovered that, of course, I was open to bands like Oregon and Ralph Towner, and as you say,
Mm,
Gismonti, and the whole Brazilian. Well, because Pat was very influenced by Brazilian musicians of that
sure.
time.
Definitely, definitely. Yeah. Yeah.
Can
I
I turn the clock back for just a second there, Pete, to talk about the earlier influences that you had in jazz? So, if you were listening to traditional jazz back in that day, I'm assuming it's folks like Charlie Christian and Django Reinhardt, people like that. Were there any other early jazz guitarists that really sort of grabbed you by the lapels and got your attention?
Uh, you're right about Django. I don't think I even had come across Charlie Christian. You see, I didn't have any friends in my hometown that listened to jazz, so it
Okay.
wasn't sort of sharing. There was one guy who was a really good guitar player. He was the best guitar player in our area, and he was into Larry Coryell, which of course was again
Hmm.
a completely different thing. And it didn't really sound like jazz to me because it was kind of jazz rock. So I,
yeah,
I
Right.
saw
yeah.
that as a kind of a side of the rock area.
Hmm.
So the jazz thing was still like a whole my own little personal world. So, when I joined, as I said, I joined a trad band. I was 21 then, and all the guys in the band were in their 50s,
Hmm.
Hmm.
because there were no other guys that were playing it back then. So somehow, yeah, I would have come across Django, and I loved it. I totally loved it, and I had a I had one fantastic experience, which is also there's also a link to today, which was when I was I think about 18 or 19. I went to the Albert Hall to hear Stefan Grappelli playing
Mm.
his 70th birthday gig, and the guitar player, and of course it was still the hot club format, except for two guitar players rather than two rhythm guitar players and soloists. So it was a lead guitar player, rhythm guitar player, double bass, and Stefan on violin. But it was playing, very much in the hot club style. The lead guitar player was a guy called John Etheridge, and he
Mm.
moved away.
Okay.
So I don't know if you know about John.
The name's
Just
familiar, but I can't picture what band to associate him with.
Okay,
for
well,
for
aside
me,
from
sorry, for me, I heard the name looking up information on yourself on your site and that you
right.
played with him. That's right. Hmm.
Yeah, so John, he played aside from the Grappelli thing, he played with Soft Machine. That was a big kind of jazz.
That's
Yes.
right. That's right. Okay.
Yeah,
Yep.
Okay.
5 years, and now he's playing again with Soft Machine.
Amazing.
They're touring the world. I mean, they come to America quite a lot actually.
Yes.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And he's also played with who else might you know? Well, I mean, the great classical guitar player John Williams. He
Yes.
toured with John and toured with Andy Summers from the Police.
Yes.
So
Yes.
John, John's had an incredible career. Anyway, so I saw John at the Albert Hall, and he just blew me away. And a couple of weeks later, I was in a pub in London, and there was a vibes player and John Etheridge in a pub, and I was sort of like, "Wait a minute, you were playing in the Albert Hall a couple of weeks ago. How does
Yeah.
this work? Now
Yeah.
I can come and talk to you." So I went and said, told him, introduced myself, and I said, "Oh, I'd love to have a lesson with you," and because at that point I hadn't played any jazz, but I liked it. And John said, "Oh, I don't really like teaching," but I was young and just sort of persuasive. And he said, all right, come up to my house on a certain date. So I went up to London. I hitchhiked, I think, to London from Suffolk, and went to his house and had this lesson with John, and it was just fantastic. And John is a guy who can talk for England, and so there was lots of chat and a bit of playing, and I left thinking, right, I can't go back and see John until I've mastered everything he's shown me. And of course, you never do. You never feel you have. So the time went by, and then it sort of got to that point where I just couldn't really go back, and so I didn't see John again for 10 years. And by then, I'd moved to Paris, so sort of catching up a little bit to where we were. Started practicing, started getting my thing together, got into the contemporary jazz thing, and started writing. And I'm realizing that's what I wanted to do, to write in a kind of contemporary jazz vein, in this kind of not really like hard fusion like Chick Corea's electric band, but more like more textural thing like Oregon and the Pat Metheny group. That's what
Hmm.
appealed to my ear.
Hmm.
Probably comes from a classical background as well.
Hmm.
Oh,
And
sure. Yeah.
yeah, and also I hear a connection between the early Genesis and the Pat Metheny group. That kind of, in a way, I see
Oh.
Pat's band as a kind of jazz version of Genesis in a kind of funny way, like expansive writing.
I can see that.
Hmm.
I can see
Yeah,
that.
but
Yeah.
in a jazz way,
Yeah.
Pat's writing is long form. There's a lot of writing
Yeah.
aside from the improvised sections, and
Right.
and very textual, and a lot of Genesis was very very textual, I found. So
Definitely.
yeah, that kind of music with, as I say, Oregon, Egberto, those kind of bands, they spoke to me. So I started writing in that kind of style. And when I made my second album, so a few years down the line, I started touring with a band, put a band together, started touring with it. We made our first album. When we made the second album, I thought, oh, it'd be really nice to get John Etheridge, the guy who gave me my first jazz guitar lesson 10 years ago, to write liner notes. So I looked in my
Ah.
and I had the phone number for John, and I called him up, and there was his voice on the end of the phone, still the same number 10 years later. And yeah, I hear this voice saying, "Hello, John Etheridge here. Sorry, I can't answer the phone here. Leave me a message, I'll call you back." So I sort of briefly said, "You won't remember me. I came and had a lesson with you 10 years ago, and I've
Hmm.
started taking music seriously. And just made my second album, and I think it'd be lovely if you write the liner notes. And can I send you the masters?" Then I came back in from being out one day, a couple of weeks later, or something, or maybe a couple of days, and there's a message on my answer phone saying, "Hello, John Etheridge here. I just got your message. Yes, I'm happy to spiel off lots of nonsense about your record. Just send me the tapes." So I sent John the tape. Anyway, cut a long story short, we didn't actually speak. It was back and forth, and he faxed me, back in the old days of faxes. He faxed
Oh,
me the
sure.
line notes, and I read them. They were great. They were really lovely. So they became the line notes on the album. So
Fantastic.
so about I don't know, the album came out, and next time I came over to England, I thought, oh, I'll take John a nice bottle of wine as a thank you. So I went to London, called him up, and I said, "Hi, John. It's me that you wrote the line notes for, and I'm in your area. Are you in? I've got a little something for you." And he said, "Yeah, come round." So I went round, and there I was in the same house as John, as I had my guitar lesson with him, and we just had this very odd conversation at a certain point, because it transpired that when John heard me ask him to write the liner notes, he hadn't actually clocked that I'd been round to his house. And at a certain point, and his house
Oh,
had changed around a
Okay.
little bit, and I started saying, in a bit of a lull, because we didn't really know each other. There was a slightly embarrassing lull in the conversation. I said, "Oh, by the way, John, didn't wasn't that bit over there, and this room was like that?" And suddenly John went completely silent. And they went, "How did you know that? You've never been here before, have you?" And then there was me going,
Uh-oh.
felt like for
Yeah.
a minute thinking, have I made up the whole thing? And
Yeah.
I said to him, you
Oh
know,
no.
it was probably like
Yeah.
I was sort of silent for 3 seconds while we were both sort of staring at each other in silence.
Yeah.
And I
It's
said,
yeah, awkward,
and I said,
definitely.
yeah, but John, don't you remember? I said when I called you, I had a guitar lesson with you here, and he said, "Oh, I didn't really listen to your message. I just thought you were some random guy wanting liner notes." And so there was this like complete sort of like sort of falling about laughing, both of us. Anyway, that was the beginning
Oh
of a
no.
friendship. And ever since then, we've played together on and off, reasonably regularly. In fact, my next gig in my hometown, where I run a club called The Spin, is with John. So there we go. Is that's
Very nice.
yeah.
Yeah.
So I think I've digressed a bit from one of your earlier questions. I can't remember what,
No,
but
it's fine. It's fine.
yeah,
This is the kind of conversation we like on the channel, so it's great. It's great.
Things just
fantastic.
meander. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
Yeah,
no,
wonderful.
yeah,
I'm just going to get up and turn off a heater. It's so hot in here. I'll be right.
yeah, no,
Oh, sure.
no,
There we go.
it's fine.
Within earshot. There we go. Done.
While you were talking about your influences and whatnot, um, knowing that you're from the UK, I'm hearing this kind of very large, I'll call it a lapse just because you haven't mentioned it, of people like Clapton, Beck, Page, folks like that. Did that whole era of like rock blues guitar just pass you by because you were just so heads
No,
down in trad land or
no, it didn't. When I first
okay.
started playing guitar, which when I was probably 16. I mean, I'd played classical guitar before, but when I first got
Hmm.
an electric guitar, I think I was about 16.
Mm.
Those were exactly the guys I was listening to, the kind of bluesy. It was still, you see, it was still, I always say, the kind of the allure of the dominant seventh chord, which touched me. And of course, with blues, they're all dominant seventh chords. And and so yes, Clapton with John Mayall and the Blues Breakers,
I was gonna say, yeah,
early, his all the
Yeah.
bluesy guys. Yeah, Beck. I mean, I loved Blow by Blow. I still think it's a stonking album.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
yeah.
definitely,
Who
definitely.
else are those blues guys? Um, I mean, Roy Buchanan. That not
Mm.
wasn't hugely known over here, but I came across him. Um, Who else did you mention? So Beck, I mean Jimmy Page. I was
Yeah,
kind of into Zeppelin, and I saw them actually. I saw them in their last gig in England with Bonham, and
really.
that
Oh, at
was
Nebworth?
a Nebworth. Yeah,
Yes,
yeah,
Yeah, okay.
that was that gig, and it was magnificent. Is the word? It was truly magnificent.
Wow.
I would have to say it would be. Yeah, definitely,
Yeah, they
definitely.
came on very suave in kind of silk suits. And they walked on stage, and I can't remember what the first song they played was, although I think it's Kashmir, but I'm not. I don't know. But what I do remember is by the end of the first song, they were already drenched in sweat. Just the energy was
Yeah,
incredible,
yeah. I
and
can
Wow.
the
just
gig.
imagine.
And I was so glad I went because I kind of went thinking, oh, I wonder if they can pull this off still. Because In Through the Outdoor had come out, which was I
Hmm.
thought, quite different from all the albums which led up to that, and I wasn't very impressed
Sure.
with In Through the Outdoors. So
Yeah,
it's
yeah.
sort of like okay, and a lot of my friends were going. I thought, well, yeah, it's I'm sure it's going to be good, but yeah, I was totally blown away by that. So so yes, I was into those more kind of bluesy bands until a friend of mine. So yeah, Kashmir. I'm under. You've obviously checked out what I've been doing.
I
My
did
sort of
some
rock.
research.
Yes,
I did
yeah.
some research. Yeah, I do my
So
best. Yeah.
um, so Kashmir. When I joined Kashmir, we were playing covers, and we were playing Zeppelin, Free, Rolling Stones, which
Mhm.
again was kind of blues based songs. All the Stones.
Hmm.
Well, I always
Sure.
back then I preferred the Stones to the Beatles because the Stones were more blues based, whereas
Hmm.
the Beatles is
More pop based. Yeah,
more pop and yeah, a lot of classical influence, and especially when George Martin got involved. Um,
yeah.
and um, and then so this band we were literally just playing covers until we started sort of like from one day to the next we started writing, and the bass player in the band. who's become a lifelong friend, he was into Genesis, and he introduced me to Genesis, and it was like, oh, okay, I love this.
So this would have been like Foxtrot time,
Yeah.
nursery
Well,
crime. Okay.
no, it was later. It was later.
Okay.
I missed out on the actual time.
Okay.
Unfortunately, Gabriel had already left by then. This would be
Okay.
Trick of the tail.
1978. Yes, Trick of the Tail.
Yeah,
Exactly.
wind and weathering, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. And in fact, I think Steve Hackett had already left.
Okay,
He
Wind
just
and Wuthering. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
so
Yeah.
so I actually saw Genesis at Nebworth the year before I saw Zeppelin.
Bloody hell. Really?
Oh yeah. I've
Yeah,
heard
they were
the
headline.
recordings from that. A
Oh,
fantastic show. Good Lord.
sweet
Oh,
Jesus. Okay.
it was a great show.
Mm.
Um, and so yeah, when I got introduced to that, I sort of my interest, just as my interest in jazz went from trad to or the kind of blue era, let's say that was a
Hmm.
more realistic
Yeah.
transition from the kind of blue late 50s, early 60s period to the contemporary jazz of the day, when I heard Brecker and all that. So similarly, I went from this kind of blues oriented rock era to the whole Genesis thing. So that then I got introduced to, well, Yes, and I saw Yes and Emerson Lake and Palmer, who sadly I never saw, Pink Floyd, who I never saw. Yeah, all those bands. And so my entire kind of listening interest went more from the blues guys to the prog guys of the period.
Hmm.
But it's still,
Gotcha.
if you put on, a great record with um, Peter Green back in the day, when Peter Green was
Hmm.
like killer blues guitar player, and I mean, for me, one of the greatest American players was a guy whose name, Johnny Winter.
Oh
Okay.
yeah. Hmm.
Okay. Okay. I
There's
get
one
that.
album that I really love called which the band called Johnny Winter and with Rick Derringer, and I think it's just called Johnny Winter and Live, and there's
Okay.
one very long blues track called It's My Own Fault, and it's
Hmm.
Johnny's playing on that is just fantastic. So I'll still, if you put that on, I'm not going to be, oh, I'm bored with blues, I'll still listen to it. I'll
There,
still I'll go to a blues gig for sure.
there are some albums that you listen to, and I've said this before on the channel, it takes you to a time and place, and you never forget it. It's like
Yeah,
listening to it for the
exactly.
first time. It just brings
Yeah.
you back to that certain time and place where you first
Mm-hmm.
heard it. So I get that 100%.
Yeah.
100%. I do have a question. I know we're kind of jumping here, but in my
Conversation.
notes, yeah,
Yeah.
there we go. In my notes, I have here that you were influenced by Steely Dan's Asia,
Oh yeah.
and well, is, I should mention that Asia is Jim's favorite album
Ah.
from Asia, and
Okay.
Asia, kind of blue.
yeah, yeah.
They bump up against one another.
Right.
So
Yeah. Yeah.
my question is, also you one of your other influences was American Garage by Pat Metheny, and again Hejira from Joni Mitchell, obviously. What was what, what grabbed you about Asia in terms of the album overall? Like,
Well, I guess you see those three albums that you cited, they were the three albums that got me through music college in a way. Because as I said, I didn't
Hmm.
really enjoy the college. And these three albums, like all of them, are very interesting harmonically. And I love harmony. I just love the,
yeah,
interesting, intriguing harmony, satisfying harmony. And Asia is it's just fantastic. The writing, every song has got its own vibe to it, yet it's cohesive. The whole album is very cohesive. A bit like we were saying with Still Life Talking. It's you put it on at the beginning, you can listen to the whole thing as like one piece, and in a way,
Right.
Asia is the same.
yeah,
And every piece has got incredible strength in so many aspects of it. I didn't really understand it at the time, on a musical level. And in a way, I've still got very much the ability to listen to records as a punter, as a listener, rather than analyzing things. So I'll just enjoy it as a member of an audience, as opposed to from a sort of musician's point of view.
Hmm.
Yet
Hmm.
then I'll come to albums and I'll start. Now I still do it. I transcribe songs for fun, and I'm just by chance I'm in a bit of a Paul Simon phase of
Really?
putting.
Mm.
Okay.
Speaking
He's
of harmonically strong.
Yeah.
yes, exactly. See, I mean, to me, he's of the singer-songwriter guys. He's
Yeah.
probably the most interesting harmonically, I think, that I know, that's famous, that's out there. Like Joni. I mean, Joni has got such a personal voice in her writing, and
Hmm.
of course Simon has as well. So, not to leap too much across to that, but Asia was the same for me. Without
Hmm.
really analyzing it, I just loved the lushness, coupled with the tightness of the groove, yeah, and all those absolutely top players that they
Yeah.
Yeah,
used
definitely.
on
Definitely.
that album. And so there's a connection with all three of them. American Garage. That was the first album that I was sort of aware of the Matheny group before, actually, long before Still Life Talking. And funny enough, it didn't lead on to Still Life Talking back then.
Hmm.
In fact, I don't know if it. Let's see, that would have been 80. Yeah, maybe Still Life Talking hadn't even come out. But I don't know why I didn't sort of pursue the Matheny group thing back then. But American Garage, again, you see, it's got sort of like proggy elements about it, these long form pieces.
Oh yeah,
And
like the epic. Yeah.
yeah, like the epic.
That's right.
And
That's right. That's right.
um, what's that other piece? Well, Across the Heartland, that's pretty epic as well.
Hmm.
And they're just fabulous pieces. So there's one piece, Airstream. If you listen to
Yes.
just
That's right.
the harmonic structure, it's just fantastic. And so in a way, you could put if you imagine Steely Dan taking Airstream and arranging it their way, it would sound like a Steely Dan tune. And there's
Hmm.
probably Steely Dan tunes that if you had the Matheny group arranging with their voice and instrumentation would sound like a Matheny group. So there was
Hmm.
a kind of connection there.
Yeah. No, it's funny you say that. Just quickly, a sidebar. There's audio on YouTube of Donald Fagen performing with Pat Metheny in a
Oh
club
wow.
in New York in 19, I believe it was 1981.
91.
91, sorry, my
Oh
apologies. So yeah,
wow.
yeah,
I
so
know exactly what you're talking about.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
I'll
yeah.
have
See,
to
I
check that
kind of
out.
troll the internet to check stuff out like that. So I'm like
Yeah.
I just
Yeah, it's Pat sitting in on Sign In Stranger, which was from the Royal
that
Scam
that's
album.
right, that's right, that's right.
Wow.
And Pat's using his synclavier guitar, the one that's from like
The
Are You
in
Going With Me, that type of
Yeah,
sound.
yeah,
Yeah.
And his solo is just takes it to another planet almost. So it's well worth seeking out on the webs. I'll see if I can find it and put it in a little chat pod here
Oh, that would be
for us as
great.
well.
oh
Yeah.
yeah,
Um,
that'd
but
be
but
great,
that
Jim.
to me just kind of screams the ultimate nexus of Steely Dan and Pat Metheny. The other
Right.
thing that I had heard back in the day when Steely Dan was going to start touring again in '93 is that there was some preliminary announcement that Pat was going to be in the touring band, which turned
What?
out to be. Yeah, which turned out to be, even Pat said, "What I am," and they ended up kind of talking, and Pat said, I think I would be one guitar too many. And that's his kind of, self-deprecating mantra. He feels like one guitar is one guitar too many.
Yeah,
So,
no,
Yeah.
wow, that would have been amazing.
Yeah.
But
yeah.
Yeah.
I do have one question though. Just quickly, just go back to a point you made about being able to listen to music as a fan as opposed to
Mhm.
analyzing the music. I- I've heard artists say like in the past, like Prince, for example, said that whenever he would listen to an artist uh, recordings that he would always sit there and try and dissect the music and sort of try and rearrange it in his head. Do you, and that you found it difficult to listen to other music as a fan, just strictly as a fan? Do you have that it, that problem? Can you separate from just listening as a fan as opposed to dissecting or rearranging in your mind what the music could or should be?
Yeah. No, that's what my point.
Yeah.
I can totally do that.
Oh, you can do that. Okay.
Yeah, yeah. I
Yeah.
can listen to it and not have a clue at the end what really what was going on,
Yeah. Okay.
unless I then apply a certain part of my brain deliberately, and that's a different thing. If I want to know what's going on afterwards, then I play it and will transcribe it, and then I'm listening in a kind of a different way. I'm listening in an analytical way, and all the kind of things that we do as musicians. You listen, you check out the bass line, check out the quality of the chords,
Okay.
and then figure it out that way. But I don't want to do that because when I'm listening to music for pleasure, I want
Mhm.
to listen to it as the artist designed it to be, as a for the audience to have an emotional response to it, and I don't want to miss out on that.
Mhm. No,
And
I
so I'm
agree with
I'm
you.
kind of glad I can do that. I can totally listen to it. I told you my dad was a cathedral organist, and
Yes.
he had such incredible ears that it was impossible for him to do that. And he told me,
Mm.
I don't know if you know this, but in Germany, the standard pitching is quite a bit higher than we use in England. So the note
Mm.
A in England is at 440 hertz, and in Germany it's quite a bit higher. I can't remember what the number is, maybe
Okay.
448 or something,
Okay.
and it's
Mm.
which makes it nearly a semitone higher. And so my dad said if he listened to a German organist playing on the German organ, when he listens, he's re-fingering it a semitone higher, and he can't help himself
Okay.
listening and trying to figure out how to play it a
Okay. He's
semitone
yeah,
higher.
he's used to doing that. Yeah.
And he said, because he had perfect pitch, my dad had perfect pitch. So, and he
Hmm.
said it was a curse. A lot of the time, it was a curse because of that.
I've heard people refer to it as that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. I have
yeah. So,
too. I have too.
fortunately, I don't have that talent at all.
Well,
So you've got
okay.
sweat equity that comes into it for you.
Yeah.
Sorry, the what?
You just have to sweat it out. We'll call it sweat equity. You know,
Trying to
you don't have
figure.
to. Yeah,
Well, I
you're
don't.
not you don't have the perfect pitch, so you're just kind of grinding it out. It sounds like
Oh,
it
I see what
sounds
you
like it
mean.
goes from
Yeah,
here
yeah,
to
yeah.
here.
Yeah.
That's right. If I want to transcribe something, I mean, I train myself I still do, to try and transcribe faster and faster. So, um, and it's an enjoyable thing. Then I really enjoy it, and then finding out, how these songs are structured.
Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, I can't. I mean, my dad could do it in real time. If he listened to a record, he could write everything down as
Really?
fast as he could write. Um,
Okay. Okay.
yeah. So, but anyway, the point being,
Wow.
it allows me to be able to listen as a punter and enjoy it as the artist intended it to be
Okay.
on on one level, and then when I'm in my kind of professional music mode, then I'm able to you go into a different part of the brain, which um, then allows me to sort of zoom in to the detail of what's going on.
Okay. Okay. I have a quick, well, not a quick question because there's no such thing as quick questions on this channel. But your collaboration with Nicolas Meier, uh, how in the hell did that come about? Because you two work fantastic together. Like I've listened to some of the music I told you before we start recording. These albums are phenomenal. They are
Oh,
phenomenal. Like I'm gushing here, pardon me, but because I am a music fan, I'm always on the hunt for discovering new music and new avenues to go down, musical avenues to go down and explore. These albums that you released, Travel to the West, Chasing Tales, The Colors of Time, The Alluring Ascent, and Mercurial Indigo. These albums are phenomenal. And ladies and gentlemen, we're going to put the link as to where you can get these albums. Trust me, believe me, they're amazing. But I was just wondering, this collaboration with Nicholas, how did this come about? overall?
Well, as I mentioned briefly earlier on, I run a club called The Spin
Okay.
in
Yes.
Oxford. And the format that we had right up until COVID for 20 years, more or less, was 3 weeks out of four would be a house band, which I was in, which would be fronted by a kind of nationally known guest. And every fourth week, we'd have a band that was touring. And so that was, so yeah, roughly 12 bands a year where I wouldn't, and our house band wouldn't be playing. Every year we would, back in those days before everything was online, we would be submitted loads of CDs from bands wanting to play at the club. You know, it became quite known around the country, the Spin. So myself and the drummer of the house band, a guy called Mark Doffman, we'd pick a date, and then we'd have a very long evening, which usually was about 2 bottles of wine long, where we would put on every record, and we would make sure we listened to everything, and we put on the first track to see what was the impact, the immediate impact of this band. How did this band present itself? Play the first track, and then we'd randomly pick another track, and then we'd also make sure we listen to some soloing, so
Hmm.
because it's a jazz thing, so we want to hear, the improvisation. And we would score these. We'd both have a notepad, and we would have two columns. One column would be marks out of 10 for quality within its chosen genre.
Hmm.
And the second column would be what we call spinability, how well we think it would go down at the spin. And then we ended up doing most of them at my house. So unfortunately, I knew what was going on, but Mark, it was blindfold for him. So he wouldn't know anything about who the band was, and we put it on, listen, track by track, write our notes, and then I put on the next one, and I would know who they are, so I'd make a note of which it was. And we listened sometimes 30 albums like this, and at the
Ooh.
end we would compare notes. We'd average out our quality within its chosen genre and spinability. We'd each average out our marks, and then we'd go through it. Okay, album one, how many marks do you come up with on average? And Mark would say 8.5, and I'd look at my marks, going, "Oh, so have I, 8.5." Anyway, we'd go through it, and we'd be within half a mark of each other through the whole thing, which was so great. So that
Okay.
we'd average out our own marks, and the top 12 would get the gigs. Anyway, that's the background to what I'm about to say. One day I
It's
was on
okay.
with a band, one of my bands, and the bass player um, started talking about Nick Meyer and saying what an incredible player he was, and what an amazing band he has. And so one day Nick sent me one of his albums, and instead of putting it on the pile for to be listened to in some months' time, I thought, because this mutual friend had recommended him, I thought, I'll listen to this now. And I put it on. And it was like, oh, right, okay, I'm picking up the phone. Nick, when do you want to come and play at the Spin? And so I booked
Yeah.
him straight away with his band. And so Nick came and played with his band, and it was, yeah, it was incredible playing. And Nick's playing was fantastic, and he was also a lovely guy. We hit it off straight away.
Yeah.
And just around that time, I had been working with a band, a very unusual band called Eclectica. And this band or it was, the lineup, as I say, very odd. It was violin, cello, and two guitars. So I was one of the guitar players, and the other guitar player was a Argentinian fellow called Luis D'Agostino, who and Luis and I had been working together. We'd made a couple of duo albums,
That's right.
and we
That's right.
and we sort of extended this duo into this quartet as a sort of another project. And that project started to develop and get some nice gigs because of the violinist and the cellist. They came from a very authentic classical background. We were starting to get gigs in classical venues as well as jazz venues. So the name of the band Eclectico totally describes it really. We played kind of all sorts of stuff in that band.
Hmm.
Steely, not Steely Dan. We did Stevie Wonder, We did some Joni, which I arranged, Chick Corea. Um,
That is
I,
eclectic. It
it
is
was,
eclectic.
yeah, it
Yeah.
was completely eclectic. Anyway,
Yeah.
we went back to Argentina, and I thought, I bet Nick would be great for this band. So I called Nick up and I said, "Do you fancy this project?" I described how it was. He said, "Yeah, this is perfect timing. I'm looking for another project." So I said, "Right, well, what's essential is that you and I lock in musically because we're the kind of the central groove of the band,
The
and the other,
focal point. Yeah.
yeah, they're the coming from the classical background, they had
Mm.
a slightly different take on sort of the whole time aspect. So
Hmm.
Nick came to my house for a play, and we just played standards, jazz standards, for about 3 hours. And I remember thinking at the end of that, thinking, this is the best musical experience I've ever had. And so Nick
That's
was
great.
immediately in the band, yeah.
Fantastic. Yeah.
And that took the band to another level because aside from anything else, Nick is a very prolific writer, whereas Luis doesn't really write. So with Eclectica before Nick joined, I'd done all the arranging and writing. And then suddenly Nick was in the band and writing stuff as well. And so I was writing more stuff to keep up. And we ended up making 2 albums within a year actually with that band.
Yeah.
And then coming out of that, we started doing a few duo gigs, just the odd thing. And of course it was just very, very easy, our playing. And we started to well, yeah, I think one day Nick said to me, "Why don't we write an album?" Oh no, that's right. Let's do a tour. Let's go on the road and record, just record. So we booked a little tour in the Southwest, and Nick brought all his recording stuff with him, and we recorded. I think we had 4 or 5 gigs. We recorded every gig, and out of that we had, as pointed out, the first album, Travels to the West, because it was all in the West,
Amazing. Amazing album. Yeah.
and that was a live album, and even from that point on, we were still not really thinking of it as a project to pursue particularly, because by then Nick was playing with Jeff Beck, so he was busy, and I think I had another project with a band called Curious Paradise, and I was kind of busy with that. So we were just doing sort of gigs when we could in between. And then I think there was probably a lull in Nick's work with Jeff. And Nick said to me, "Why don't we write an album and write for all our guitars or lots of our guitars and do a duo album and overdub and make it kind of orchestrate it for guitars?" And I thought, yeah, that's a great idea. So we put aside some time and wrote specifically for the instruments we knew we had and that would blend and try and make a very kind of orchestrated guitar album, and that's um, Chasing Tales, and that was really the beginning of that project. And we were very happy with that, and we sent it out and about the album, and we did absolutely loads and loads of gigs on the back of that album. I think we did about 100 gigs around the UK and in
Ooh,
Europe with that
okay.
record.
Okay. Great. Uh, these albums are fantastic. I mean, I gotta say, and I will be putting a link as to where you can get these albums. Not a problem. So, um, but we must discuss Hejira, if that's
Oh,
okay with you.
no, we must.
Okay, I have it right here, my copy. Um, um, now, this album the music for the album was recorded on November 17th, 2023 at the Cockpit. If my notes are correct. Um,
Spot
first of
on.
all, first of all, thank you, my dear boy, thank you. Um, my first question is, how did this project come about? And like from,
Right.
like this whole
Well,
idea. I mean, it's fantastic.
well, it was one of these beautifully serendipitous chance things that I wasn't I wasn't planning to do as a project at all. At my club, The Spin, we always, every Christmas, we try and do something, a special gig, the Christmas gig.
Yeah.
And I don't know what made me think of this, but maybe I'd put on Shadows and Light, and I thought, oh, that would be great to do that music. And I know players that will be able to completely nail it. Having run the spin for all these years, I've got to know a lot of very good players in England. And I thought, yeah, that's it. That's the band. That's the project for that one gig. So obviously I needed a great singer, and to cut a long story short, I called three other singers who said they wanted to do it, but then sort of had their own agenda. One of them didn't want to do Joni all night. The other one, next one, wanted to bring her bass player, who was her partner, and they go out as a double act. And I said, well, we have a bass player. I'd already got a bass player lined up. And she said, yeah, but we go out as double act. I said, well, okay, never mind. Good,
Yeah.
good.
Thanks anyway.
Yeah, thanks anyway.
A
The
clash
next
of
one,
egos. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
the next one
Yeah.
wanted to bring her whole band. I said, you're just not getting this. So,
Oh, sweet Jesus. Okay.
yeah,
That's good. Okay.
but thank goodness that happened because had it not, I wouldn't have got Hattie. And so Hattie is the daughter of a friend of mine who's an incredible sax player, a guy called Tim Whitehead.
Hmm.
And Tim and I used to do this gig occasionally in London in a trio. It was quite an odd trio actually. It was Tim on saxes, me on seven-string guitar, so I could cope with the bass because there was no bass player. And the third guy was a percussion player, congas and a bit of percussion. And
Oh
we
wow.
did this gig. We did this gig, as I say, occasionally, once every sort of 2 or 3 months. And one time, Tim said to me, "Oh, my daughter's. Do you mind if my daughter comes and sits in?" And I said, "No, of course not." And so Hattie came along. She sang one of her own songs, excuse me, and one of hers. Sorry, and a standard. And I remember it was "The Nearness of You," and I remember just
Ooh.
being blown away by the way she sang that. So she was sort of in the back of my mind, but very much at the back, unfortunately. And then somebody said to me, just around this time, I was looking for the singer. Somebody said, "Oh, do you realize Hattie in lockdown did a video with some guys singing Shadows and Light?" I went, "What?" And it was still online.
Oh God.
So
Okay.
I checked it out and it was like, well, there's nobody else I want to do than this person. So I called up Hattie and I said, "Look, I've got this date doing Shadows and Light. You know all the material already. Are you up for it?" And she said, "Oh, I'm busy that night, but there's nothing I'd rather do than sing Tony all night. So I'll find a depth for what I'm doing." And sure enough, she did.
Yeah.
So come the day, uh, I've got the lineup, and the gig is sold out. It's sold out very quickly. So I thought, oh, maybe we should do another date because it's sold out so fast. But then I thought, well, a lot of us haven't actually played together.
Hmm.
Some people have played with some and others with others. I thought we better play and make sure we gel. So we rehearsed in the afternoon, and it immediately worked. So in the break between the rehearsal and the gig, I said to everyone, "Get your diaries out. Let's book another date." So the next date that we could all do, and the venue was available, was 1st of March, following that Christmas. So we all put that in the diary. And I went home the next day and I called up the guy who does the IT, does our website, and I said, "Can you put in this date for this band?" It wasn't called Hejira then,
Hmm.
just the around Joni Mitchell as we called it.
Okay.
A second date. And first of all, call all the people on the waiting list. I said, "Were the people on the waiting list?" He said, "Yeah, there were 60 people on the waiting list." And I said, "Well, notify them first and then advertise it." And so he put it on online that evening. And by 11 a.m. the next day, it had sold out again.
Amazing.
Oh,
So I thought, I mean, it's a small-ish club. It's I think 120, 130 capacity, but we never sell out that fast. And it was kind of like, oh, okay, maybe I'll just try one other venue, see if it's got legs. I called up this great venue in Nottingham called Peggy's Skylight, and I emailed the guy, and he's because it's a great venue. Everybody in the country wants to play there, and I just played there. I just got a second booking with Nick, with my band with Nick. So I thought, even if he does like this, he's going to say, "Well, look, I've just booked you, and call me again in August, and we'll see. Maybe do something at the end of the year." Uh, I got an email back from him within an hour saying, "This sounds fantastic. Can you come on this date or this date or this date?" It's like, wow. And one of the dates was just 2 days after the second date of the spin on the 3rd of March.
Oh, nice.
Yeah.
So suddenly we had 2 dates in the diary
Amazing.
in March. And so I'm still talking about here just before Christmas. This is all happening,
Yeah.
kind of like the end of December. Still before Christmas, because of this, I was so enthused by this enthusiasm from elsewhere. I I found an agent, somebody that also fell in love with the idea. I mean, we didn't have any material to offer, but this agent or booker, a German lady called Ina, I told her about the project and Hattie, and she checked out Hattie online with Hattie's own material, called me back a couple of days later and said, "I've checked out Hattie and I love the idea of this project. Let's do it." And so we kind of came to an agreement, and she started getting gigs before we had any kind of promo material. I don't know how she did it. She was very good. But I thought, well, I better get some promo material together. So I booked the this theatre in Oxford called the Old Fire Station, and got the band together and got a camera crew in, recorded it properly, multi-tracked it so I could mix it. And that was our second ever performance. And that's what you can see on YouTube with Hejira, Black Crow, Coyote.
That's right.
Yeah, I think those three.
That was your second performance as a
Yeah, that
group,
was the
all the
second
stuff
ever.
that's on YouTube.
Yeah.
Ooh, that's
Good Lord,
amazing.
Pete. That is astounding.
That is amazing. I mean,
Yeah.
just to give you a bit of background where I'm coming from, the first time I heard of the album, I was in Toronto over Christmas vacation visiting family, and I get an email from Jim saying, "You need to check this out. This is great. We should do a show on this." So I was able to locate a video, one of the videos. I believe it was for Black Crow. I think it was Black Crow. I listened to like 50 seconds of it and I emailed him back, "Let's do it. I'm in." And I ordered the CD off your site that very day.
Wow.
Um, Listening to it, I was like, "This is phenomenal, phenomenal." I'm one that,
Thank you.
and then I'll shut up for a second. I am one that uh, if I listen to a piece of music, if it affects me, it brings me to tears. It
Mm,
literally brings me to tears, and Jim can attest to that.
It's true.
This brought me to tears. Literally, it brought me to tears. Hattie as a singer is phenomenal,
I agree.
phenomenal, and the band, I mean, you guys are in sync, just like locked into one another, just incredible,
Yeah, I
incredible.
mean, it's one thing to kind of hear the Live at the Cockpit record and know, okay, you guys have probably what, 2 years under your belts by that point when you're playing.
Uh, a
Just
year, a
about a
year.
year, a year.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
Okay,
That was
about
my
a year.
first
But
year.
to even compare that to what's on YouTube for what you were saying was just your second gig,
Yeah.
that's just
Yeah.
mind blowing, Pete. I mean, just to hear like Armando was saying, how in sync you guys are with this material. Not
Mm.
only were you obviously very familiar with the album, but you're incredibly just attuned to one another, and
Yeah.
when to push, when to pull back, when to give the other
Yeah.
people some space. It's just astounding feel right out of the gate for you guys. So it's doubly phenomenal. Yeah.
Well, thank you very much. I mean, I must admit, I feel very lucky with that film, that recording that we did. When I still look at that myself and think, wow, yeah, that was our second performance, and how I sometimes I send out the links to venues. When we've got a gig somewhere and they ask us, so we got films, and we've got more recent ones, as you probably know. We've got from the Live at the Cockpit. There's one film there, and there's in fact there's a couple of tracks from that show which are yes, nearly a year later, November, at the end of the first year. So we got a lot of gigs under our belt by then. But when I send out Hejira, the track Hejira, and I find it on YouTube to copy the link and it starts playing. There are still times I play it to the end myself. Oh my goodness, that was such a lovely performance of that.
Yeah, yeah. My one other question is, when you decided to do this project and you were approaching the material, were you concerned at all, or were you like, or did you just jump in with, head first and just, okay, let's just do this and have a good time with it? Were you nervous to perform or to
No, not
attack the
really.
material?
Apart from Pat's solo, that was that was a bit of a challenge.
It has to be
Uh,
intimidating.
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Um, no, I felt. I mean, I knew the band would nail it. I knew everybody in the band were into the music and great players. So
Hmm.
that combination meant it was very likely going to work, and so it did. As I said, the first rehearsal, it all it all synced up, and ever since then, I mean, another thing, I feel so lucky to have picked these particular people because aside from the percussion player who changed right after the beginning,
Hmm.
uh, it's been the same consistent personnel ever since.
Okay. Would
So
you? Yeah.
we're all, it's such a lovely group of people, just on a personal level. And in fact, I was saying to somebody just the other day, the evidence of that, in one way, was that just on the last trip we did a couple of weeks ago,
Yeah.
I noticed we were in a theatre with quite a lot of dressing rooms, backstage, and we were all in one dressing room. It was not like, oh, I'm going to my
N-
room, I'm
Oh,
going
no
to my
egos were involved. That's good. No, that's
yeah, yeah, everybody was hanging out together still, and we all travel together in a bus together. It's great. So yeah, I feel very, very, very fortunate with that. You know, it could have been like any of those guys could have been busy on that first night,
yeah.
and I wouldn't have had the same personnel.
I'm just going to mention to the audience who performs on the album with you, along with Pete Oxley on guitar. We have on drums, Rick Finley, on fretless bass and bass, Dave Jones on guitars and fantastic, phenomenal vocals, Hattie Whitehead on keyboards, Chris Eldred on percussion, Mark Sissel, and on saxophone and bass clarinet, Ollie Weston. So, ladies and gentlemen, if you have not checked out this album, I'm just going to promote yet again. You need to check out this album. Please do. But phenomenal players, all seven, phenomenal. But
Can I put a couple more questions out there, Pete,
Yeah,
related to this?
yeah, go
I'm
ahead.
interested. Your first foray into Joni's Shadows and Light album, did you approach it as a Joni fan or a Matheny Jocko Brecker fan? That's kind of my first question. I'll do a follow-up after that.
Yeah,
good
yeah.
question.
Do you mean the first foray into this project, or when I first listened to Joni as a as a
When
as a
you first listened to the Shadows and Light album, whenever you discovered it.
right, yeah, no, it was as a Joni fan. I didn't even know who
Okay.
those guys were. I didn't know who Matheny was,
Oh,
or
wow.
really. I mean,
Really?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And in a way, it was through listening to that I thought, who are these guys? They sound so lovely.
Oh
And
my God.
record. Yeah, so it was more that way round. I got the Hejira album, and I remember playing it to somebody or talking to somebody and saying, "Oh, this is a great record," and this person said, "Yeah, well, it's because it," or they said, "Of course, because it's got Jacko on it." And I thought, well, yeah. I mean, I can hear the bass player is really good, but that's not why it's a great record. It's a Joni record. These songs are great. And this person
Yeah.
was a jazzer, and so to them it was like, well, it's got Jacko on it. But I came to it from the music, the actual the soundscapes, and Shadows and
Hmm.
Lights is one of those live albums. like I have to say, Pat Metheny's Travels album, which is it both fizzes with electricity and yet is completely warm in the production.
That's exactly it.
That's
That's
Yeah,
well
exactly
said.
it.
Well said.
you put on well, just to go back, Travels,
Yeah,
you put that on, and the way it starts with "Are you going with me?" It's just this, it's just like you want to be there.
yeah,
Every time I listen to that, I
Oh
thought
yeah.
I wanted to be there.
yeah, exactly. No, I
Same
have,
with Tonight.
yeah, I have said in terms of just as a music fan for Hejira, as intricate and as textured as it is, there's a lot of space and a
Oh
lot of
yeah,
like
yeah,
breath in the playing. Um, to me, it takes me on a journey when I listen to that album, and
yeah.
it is phenomenal. It is
Mhm.
phenomenal. So, but
So,
yeah,
so
So
yeah,
so
your
yeah.
follow-up
What's
question, Jim?
to go to back to
yeah,
your
my
question?
fault. Yeah, go ahead.
Just to finish this bit of your question. So yeah, it was Hejira. When I got introduced to Hejira and loved that album, that's what then led me to Shadows of the Night and Hissing of Summer Lawn.
Gotcha.
I wanted to hear all those Joni records from that late 70s period.
Mhm.
hmm Yeah, that makes sense. When I my introduction to Shadows and Light was kind of the opposite of yours. When I was in college, there was a guy in the dorms who was a phenomenal bass player. And he's like, "Oh, have you ever heard Shadows and Light?" And I'm like, "No." I mean, I knew who Joni Mitchell was. And this was like 84 or so. And, I knew Joni from Free Man in Paris and, the all the
Yeah,
hits that were in the US. I was already a big Metheny fan at this point. So my ears were already kind of attuned to want to delight in it. And I just was
yeah,
over the moon once I heard this album.
yeah,
Um, so so I guess the follow-up questions have to do with kind of looking at Shadows and Light as source material.
yeah.
Um, what criteria do you and the band members use to kind of play as Hejira? And then also, is there ever a point where you feel like you have the permission to kind of depart from the arrangements, or do you kind of feel compelled to treat it like a holy relic and just replicate?
Right. Well, that's a really great question because we have, when we started, I said to the guys in the band, "Do you want me to write charts for the tunes?" Everyone said, "No, we'll just listen. We'll figure out our parts." And we were kind of playing it, but I said, it's not this won't be a tribute act. Pick
Mhm.
bits that you want to use from the original, but we're not trying to replicate the album note for note by any means. So, as I said, those three videos are those first three videos were our second performance. So, at that point, there was no kind of arranging happening there with it. We were kind of playing the songs in the spirit and trying to capture the vibe of Shadows of the Night.
Mhm.
However,
Yeah,
since
very
then,
well. Yeah.
um, I've started to arrange a lot of tunes which aren't on the Shadows of the Night album, but are like on the Hejira album or the Hissing of Some of the Lawns album. Great songs. I mean, we do Song for Sharon, we do
Really?
Hell Room, which are not on the Shadows of the Night. We do
Yeah.
Hissing of Summer Lawns. We do Just Like This Train, um, Free Man in Paris. Um, or so but when I arranged them, I kind of arranged them. I think, how would the Shadows of the Night Band have done them, or
Mhm.
how so to keep the concept there.
Mhm.
But they're very much more arranged now,
Mhm.
with still space for no two gigs that will sound the same because we're all improvising players, but there are a lot of written parts where maybe I'll write a sax line and I'll have it harmonized on the keyboard, so they have to play those parts to make them work. Um,
That's right.
and but the one really important thing is I never change the melody that Hattie sings. That's sacrosanct.
Mhm.
So we get I would say pretty much every gig when we're talking to the audience after the show, people come up to me and say, "I really love the way you're doing this in your own way, but you're respecting the song." And that's the
Yes.
balance I'm trying to find. So by keeping the melody there, everybody knows the song.
Yeah.
We're not mucking about with the song because that's what people latch onto.
Yeah.
But then they hear, yeah, that's I never heard it done quite that way.
Right.
So,
But
so I'm sort of thinking,
you're still keeping the essence of the piece
yes,
intact.
yeah, exactly,
Yes. Yes.
exactly, very, very much
Yeah,
so.
like
Yeah.
Woodstock with the bass clarinet and
Yeah,
Yes.
exactly.
Yeah.
That's sort of one of the ones that's starting to go off in a different, more orchestrated way. So yeah, so I use the bass clarinet quite a lot now.
Yeah.
Mm,
I mean, Song for Sharon, for example, you've got 10 verses, and Joni
Yeah.
gets away with the way she does because it's Joni. And actually on Hejira, she's overdubbed herself doing backing vocals, where we
hmm
don't have any backing vocalists. So I'm sort of using the soprano saxophone and the keyboards almost like backing vocalists
Yeah.
and writing
Okay,
lines there based on
I could hear
Joni.
that.
Yeah,
Hmm.
based on Joni's I use some of Joni's backing vocal lines on the
Hmm.
soprano sax and the keyboards.
Hmm
So I'm kind of orchestrating it, and occasionally I reharmonize bits, but not so much that people go, well, they're not playing the song right now. It's just to sort
Right.
of add the spice and some of our own personality into it.
That's right.
So
hmm
that's kind of the concept of where we are now. So I think the second album, the next one we do, which is the plan is to do that. We're going to be playing at the Playhouse in Oxford, which is quite a big gig in June. We're going to film and record that gig, and the idea is to get the majority of that gig, all the tunes that aren't on Live at the Cockpit for the next album.
Okay. I'm getting my copy when it comes. All right.
Absolutely. I'm hovering over the
I'm telling
keyboards,
you,
ready to order.
I will do it. I will do it. I'm a mean man with a keyboard. If I need to buy something, and I will buy that. I definitely will.
I think I can believe you.
No, I mean unreal, unbloody real. Like amazing, amazing. This could have been a double album. This could
Well,
have been a double album. I mean,
mm. Yeah, I think
but
we also play a couple of instrumentals on every gig just to give Hattie's voice a rest. And in a way, because we've got like, racehorse level musicians playing mostly at a trot or a canter, because that's we're not you see what I mean? We're not there to grandstand. We're at all.
Sure.
We're all there to serve the song. That's
hmm
another great thing about this band. Everybody is a
yeah,
virtuosic player, but
yeah.
nobody is there to grandstand in this music. We're all there to support the song. So to give
hmm
everybody a bit of a go, we have an instrumental section in each set.
Yeah.
So we play one of my pieces in one set, and another we do a Matheny Mays piece because that's and we do something from that period. We
Well, I
do
gotta ask what it is.
well at the moment we're playing either Phase Dance,
Ooh,
Song for Bilbao, or It's Just Talk. We kind of alternate between those three at the moment.
Wow.
good
And they're
Lord.
and they're really fun. And we always get again people coming up to us saying, "Oh, it was so great to hear you playing Phase Dance. I wasn't expecting that." But it's right from the same period, so it
Sure.
fits right in.
The
Uh,
Well, and you've got that little quote in phase dance from "In France They Kiss on Main Street," right?
yeah, we can't help ourselves doing that.
yeah.
That's how could you,
Yeah,
really?
No, it's true.
that's,
It's true.
that's right.
And
So,
yeah, no, I
so
was just gonna say, in watching the videos and the reaction from the audience to the Hejira performances, for me as a music fan, as strictly a music fan, I think that these performances bring people back to us again to a certain point in time in their lives, and
mhm,
in a very um, a warm way. And they just want to um, revel in that and just enjoy the moment for what
yeah,
it is. There is no flash and dash. There is no pyrotechnics. There is no, grandstanding. There's just beautifully executed musicianship that is done on the night, and you just take it for what it is and you enjoy it. That's
yeah.
the beauty of it. Oh,
Well, I'm so glad that comes across
It
because
does come across.
yeah,
It does come across. Oh,
that
very much so. Very much so. Again, I'm gushing again. I apologize. I'm gushing as a music fan,
Stop
but
gushing.
uh,
I'll stop
okay,
gushing.
yeah.
Okay.
Is there any hope of Hejira coming to North America?
We would so love to do that. I tell you, we'd really love to do that. There's one chap in upstate New York who's kind of sounds like he's a similar fan to you guys, and he's been writing to me. Really nice guy, and he said, "I will do anything I can to help you come, including help financially." And he's trying to find us an agent because that's what we need. We need an agent
In
who will
North
take the
American, yeah.
project seriously
Yeah.
and find us enough gigs to make it viable. Because unfortunately, there's a huge problem with visas. They're
Yeah.
Mm.
expensive, and that's just before we start. I think they're about $1,000 a man,
Oh
American dollars.
Lord. Yeah.
So that's seven of us plus the flights. Then we've got to rent, vehicle, and rent backline gear. So just we need sort of probably I figured it out. We need about 10 gigs paying a minimum of $3,000
Yeah.
to cover our costs,
Just to
which
Yes.
break
was
even, let alone, yeah.
break even,
Yes.
yeah.
Yes.
But
There's a
we're
lot of pieces to the puzzle that have to
yeah,
fit.
but we're pursuing it.
Yeah. No, please, if you please come to North America, come to Canada, come to the US, please.
Well, if
Oh,
you guys know any agents that would have your enthusiasms,
oh my goodness.
please,
I'll see what I can do.
yeah,
I'll see what we can
yeah,
do.
I will send you an email, Pete. I owe you the link to that Donald Fagen Matheny sign in stranger thing, so
yeah.
I'll send that over later on today too.
Fantastic. Thank you so much.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that brings an unfortunate end to this conversation with Mr. Pete Oxley. We want to thank Pete for joining us, for
Thank
taking
you.
time out of his busy schedule. It has been sublime, really. It has been. And please check out Hejira Live at the Cockpit. Again, we will put links down in the comments as to where you can get this CD. And if you don't have it yet, what the hell are you waiting for? Like, please, seriously.
Get on
You
it.
get on it now, like right now. Um, pause this video and go. And please, again, Pete, thank you again for this wonderful conversation and for taking time
Thank
out
you
to
so
speak with
much.
us. Uh,
Pleasure. Pleasure, guys. Thank you so much. Thank you for having me on. And again, thank you for your enthusiasms. I really appreciate it.
It's an easy thing to get enthused about,
it
Pete.
was our
Wonderful work to
it was our
everyone.
pleasure. It was our
Well,
pleasure.
we'll keep in touch.
Definitely, definitely. All right. Have a good day,
Please.
ladies and
Hey,
gentlemen.
bye for now.
Bye bye.